I thank the representative of the European Union, and I now give the floor to the representative of Venezuela to speak on behalf of the Group of Friends of the Charter of the United Nations.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. President. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela has the honor to take the floor on behalf of the members of the Group of Friends in defense of the Charter of the United Nations. Since the very outset of this speech, we stress that its participation in today's interactive dialogue should in no way be construed as an endorsement of this interactive dialogue, especially bearing in mind that General Assembly Resolution 77/230 was neither adopted by consensus, nor does it adhere to the very purposes and principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. It is important for us to make this clear from the very beginning, taking into account the fact that, since its establishment almost 2 years ago, our Group of Friends has been insisting upon the pressing need to ensure compliance with and strict adherence to the tenets of the UN Charter, that both in letter and spirit, as a prerequisite for making global peace and sustainable development a reality for all peoples of the world. Against this backdrop, we take this opportunity to reiterate both our serious concerns at the increasing threats against the United Nations Charter and the urgent need to reaffirm and defend its purposes and principles. This as a guarantee of peace and balance in the international order on the basis of inclusivity, respect for diversity, national sovereignty, the legal equality of states, the peaceful settlement of dispute, social progress, and the attainment of human rights. All of this needs to be achieved within the framework of a reinvigorated, effective, and inclusive multilateralism. Mr. President, the member states of our Group of Friends attach the utmost importance to the protection and promotion of all human rights, both individual and collective human rights. This without distinction or levels or categories. We also consider that the promotion and protection of these rights are strengthened on the basis of dialogue and cooperation, and in accordance with the principles of impartiality, objectivity, transparency, non-selectivity, non-politicization, and non-confrontation, and also taking into account the respect for the principle of sovereignty and for all of the other obligations emanating from the UN Charter. These include the obligation to refrain from intervening in matters that are essentially within the domestic jurisdiction of any state. All of this should take place within a framework of equality and mutual respect between states. In this vein, we stress our serious concern at the continued proliferation of unilateral country-specific mechanisms that purport to conduct an impartial assessment, a supposedly impartial assessment of the human rights situation in specific states, when their real intention is to weaponize human rights to attack sovereign states and national governments. These attacks are waged with the purpose of, among others, meddling in their internal affairs. Such mechanisms, we should state this clearly, neither respond to the true spirit of human rights, nor enjoy the consent of the concerned states. These country-specific reports and resolutions are consequently selective, politically motivated, divisive, and furthermore they weaken human rights institutions. For this reason, we call for an end to such approaches. In light of the above, we insist on the need for dialogue, cooperation, engagement, and national ownership in every process whose real objective is the strengthening of human rights, both at national and international levels. At the same time, we reaffirm our staunch determination to continue working actively and constructively to improve the effectiveness and scope of the universal human rights system. In this vein, in our view, the UPR is the most appropriate mechanism that we have for engaging in such discussions on human rights situations throughout the world. Mr. President, in the context of the Syrian Arab Republic, Should there really be genuine interest in addressing human rights of the people of Syria? Well, we must also and indeed first address the substantive problem, the elephant in the room. That is, Mr. President, the fact that for the last 40 years the Syrian people as a whole have been subjected to the illegal application of a set of unilateral coercive measures. These were even ratcheted up during the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic. These UCMs have violated and continue to massively violate today all the people's human rights. At the same time, these UCMs have inflicted untold suffering and pain. This has been largely recorded inter alia by several UN independent experts. The immediate complete and unconditional lifting of these cruel and illegal measures would be a first step in the right direction in order to ultimately redress the human rights situation in Syria, and would be a first step towards improving the humanitarian situation and alleviating the prolonged suffering of the Syrian people, particularly now in the aftermath of the tragic earthquake that beleaguered the country last month. Despite all of these challenges and obstacles, Mr. President, we note the efforts of the government of the Syrian Arab Republic in this important field and indeed in many others. Such efforts are always focused on ensuring the well-being of the Syrian people. We call for the continuation of such efforts, and we also state that it is necessary to ensure that these efforts are nationally owned. At the same time, we underscore the primary role of the Syrian government and its institutions in this regard. To conclude, the Group of Friends calls for an end to the politicization and weaponization of human rights for the purpose of attacking sovereign states or for the purposes of advancing narrow and self-serving agendas. We also call for an end to any practice of double standards that undermines human rights and prevents a harmonious environment and real progress in the field of human rights. At the same time, we stress that the continuation of such approaches and practices is a flagrant violation of the UN Charter, a charter which has committed all of us to promote respect for and assistance for the realization of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all. Mr. President, in our national capacity, we wish to insist upon the need for this General Assembly to maximize its ability to avoid itself being instrumentalized for political ends. It's being instrumentalized in this way through instruments adopted without any transparency and without consensus. We should bear in mind that these approaches, far from supporting efforts for peace, break down trust and evade diplomatic processes underway. At the same time, these practices violate flagrantly and deliberately the principles of cooperation, constructive dialogue, universality, impartiality, objectivity, non-selectiveness, non-confrontation, and non-politicization, which should always govern our approach to human rights. Lastly, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela reiterates its recognition for the achievements garnered by the Syrian Arab Republic and for their efforts to retain their political unity and to consolidate internal stability. They've done this together with international actors, including the United Nations. We recognize the progress that has been made in terms of the guarantees to promote and protect the human rights of the Syrian people. This has all been achieved despite the cruel incursion of terrorist organizations and despite foreign armed intervention promoted by governments that still today unsuccessfully insist on trying to get Syria to bend to their will, but they're also trying to put an end to Syria as a nation through harmful interventionist policies and regime change policies. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant.
I thank the representative